The countdown hit 0. Champagne corks popped, and a spray of fake snow drifted down from the ceiling, dusting the shoulders of my father's expensive suit. He clinked his glass with a spoon, and the room fell silent. This was his favorite part of the night, his annual performance. To family, he boomed, his voice echoing in the cavernous living room. He slung a proud arm around my younger sister Chloe, pulling her into his side. A chorus of 50 voices, friends, investors, neighbors, echoed the toast, their faces lit with admiration. I stood in the back, near the caterer's bar. My own glass was empty. My throat was tight. As we enter a new year, he continued, his voice dripping with carefully practiced emotion, we must recognize those who make this family shine. His eyes did a slow, deliberate scan of the room. They slid right past me, a ghost in the corner, and landed squarely on Chloe. Of course they did. She practically glowed, stepping forward into the spotlight he had created for her. She had just turned 21. She was the golden child, the one for whom everything was easy, the one he saw. He gestured to a massive, silver-wrapped box on the gift table. Chloe, my darling, for all your hard work finally finishing your art history degree. Chloe let out a theatrical gasp, her hands flying to her mouth as she tore at the paper. Inside wasn't a gift, but a framed photograph of a gleaming white Mercedes-Benz C-Class. My father dangled the key fob from his finger, the silver logo winking in the chandelier light. The crowd erupted in a symphony of oohs and ahs. $70,000. For a degree she barely passed. My stomach coiled into a knot of fire. I felt the familiar heat creeping up my neck, into my cheeks. And for Maya, my father said, his gaze finally finding me. His smile was different now. Thinner. An obligation for all your support. This year, he pointed to the other box on the table. The tiny one. The one wrapped in cheap, crinkling paper from the drugstore. It was the size of a coffee mug. A heavy, suffocating silence fell over the party. Every eye in the room turned to me. I had to walk forward. My heels sank into the plush white carpet, each step a small, humiliating surrender. I peeled back the paper. My fingers felt numb. Inside was a plastic piggy bank, hot pink. The kind you buy for a 5-year-old? On the bottom, a white sticker still had the price printed in black ink, $4.99. A few people chuckled. It wasn't cruel, just uncomfortable, pitying. I saw my aunt mouth the word seriously to her husband across the room. My father's face was made of stone. This was the lesson. This was the point. He was reminding me of my place. I looked from the cheap plastic in my hands to the sparkling key fob still in his. Chloe was already posing for pictures, her friends swarming her, their phone flashes blinding. Something inside me didn't just crack. It vaporized. All the years of being the dutiful daughter, the fixer, the invisible support beam, it all turned to ash. I set the pig down on the table. Gently. I didn't say a word. I turned and walked straight to my father. I reached out, took the Mercedes key fob from his stunned fingers, and turned toward the massive oak door. His voice cut through the silence. Maya, what in the world do you think you're doing? I didn't answer him. I walked out the front door, across the perfectly manicured lawn, the cold night air hitting my face. I pressed the unlock button. The new Mercedes chirped from its spot in the driveway, its headlights flashing twice, illuminating the path to my escape. I slid into the driver's seat. The new car smell was intoxicating. I could feel 50 pairs of eyes watching me from the giant picture window. I put the car in drive and pulled away, leaving them all standing in the silence. The leather seats felt like a fantasy, but my hands were shaking so hard I couldn't grip the steering wheel. I pulled over onto a dark side street, the engine humming quietly. On the passenger seat, my phone was having a seizure, a relentless, angry vibration. I ignored it. This was never about a car. It was never about the gifts. It was about the invoice. A memory flashed in my mind, sharp as broken glass. 6 months ago. I was in my father's empty office at 2 a.m, the air stale with the smell of old coffee. In front of me sat a stack of bright red, overdue invoices. He'd forgotten to pay a key supplier for 3 months, and his entire company was about to go under. I had used my own savings, the money I had carefully, painfully squirreled away for my future. I wired the $35,000 just hours before the lawsuit was filed. His response when I told him? A curt nod. He didn't even look up from his newspaper. "It's your duty to the family," he'd said, his voice flat. "Don't be ungrateful for the opportunities I've given you." Ungrateful. That was his favorite word for me. Then another memory. Last year. Chloe's DUI. I was the one who got the call from the police station, the one who paid her impound fee with my rent money. All she did was cry about how embarrassed she would be if her friends found out. My life was a tapestry of fixing their mistakes, of plugging the holes, in their sinking ship while they drank champagne on the deck. I finally reached for my phone. 37 missed calls. A dozen texts from Chloe, each one calling me a selfish, jealous monster. My finger hovered over the screen, and then I saw it. A calendar reminder. And visa renewal apt. Financial docs due. My heart seized in my chest. It was in 2 weeks. I was here on a skilled worker visa, and the renewal process was brutal. It required proof of significant personal savings to show I was financially stable. The savings I had drained to pay that supplier invoice. Without that proof, my visa would be denied. I'd lose my job, my apartment, my entire life. Everything I had built on my own would be gone. Suddenly, the car wasn't just a car anymore. It was the only asset I had left. The only thing that could prove my financial stability. An asset that, when I really thought about it, I had already paid for. The phone buzzed again, this time vibrating in my hand. It was Dad. I took a deep, shuddering breath and answered. Before I could even whisper hello, his voice, cold and sharp as ice, cut through the speaker. "You have 1 hour to bring the car back, Maya. 1 hour. Or I'm calling the police and reporting it stolen." I listened to him breathe on the other end of the line. Heavy, angry breaths, like a bull getting ready to charge. He was waiting for me to cry, to apologize, to crumble like I always had. "Did you hear me?" He snarled, his voice a low growl. "The police, Maya. A stolen vehicle report. Is that what you want? A criminal record to go with that charming new attitude of yours?" My blood ran cold. The visa application, a police report, even a false one, would be a death sentence for it. He knew that. This wasn't just a threat. It was a precision-guided missile aimed at the foundation of my life. I glanced at the passenger seat, where my work bag sat. Tucked inside was a simple manila folder. I had put it there this morning, before I even left for the party. A small part of me knew this day was coming. A small part of me had been preparing for it. "I heard you," I said. My voice was so quiet he had to stop his heavy breathing to hear me. "Good," he spat, the word dripping with venom. "So you're bringing it back." Now. Silence. I let it hang in the air between us, a thick, heavy blanket. I wanted him to feel it. The shift. The exact moment the ground he had stood on his entire life started to crack beneath his feet. "No," I said. The silence on his end was different this time. It wasn't angry. It was shocked, stunned. "What did you just say to me?" He whispered, his voice dangerously soft. "I said no," I repeated, and this time my voice didn't tremble. I reached into my bag, pulled out the manila folder, and opened it. I stared at the crisp, clean document from the DMV. "You can't report a car stolen when you don't own it." I paused, letting my next words land with the force of a physical blow. "The title is in my name, Dad." I could almost hear the gears grinding in his head, the confusion snapping into pure, unfiltered rage. He started yelling then, a torrent of familiar insults. I was selfish. I was trying to tear the family apart. I was, and always had been, completely and utterly ungrateful. I didn't say another word. I just pressed the red button on my screen and ended the call. My hands were still trembling, but a strange, quiet calm washed over me. The first boundary of my entire life had just been drawn. My phone screen lit up again, and my stomach dropped, expecting another attack. But it wasn't from him. Or Chloe. It was a text from a number I hadn't seen in years. Uncle Ben. My mother's quiet, observant younger brother. The one my father had pushed out of our lives the moment my mother was gone. The message was short, but it changed everything. "Heard what happened. Call me. I know about the car, and I know about Mom's promise." For 2 days, there was nothing. A strange, unnerving silence that was almost worse than the yelling. I let myself believe for a few foolish hours that I had won, that my one act of defiance had been enough. I was wrong. He wasn't backing down. He was reloading. On the third day, my phone began to buzz. And it didn't stop. It started as a trickle, then became a flood. Not calls, but texts. Dozens of them, from cousins, aunts, old family friends I hadn't spoken to in years. Maya, your father is worried sick about you. Please call him. Honey, I heard what happened. Is it true you stole Chloe's car? We are all praying for you. Your behavior is erratic and concerning. Please let us help you. Then my cousin Sarah sent me the screenshots. My father had created a new WhatsApp group, a sprawling chat with over 50 family members. He'd named it Family Update. In it, he had written a long, carefully worded post about my recent and severe emotional breakdown. He claimed I'd suffered a psychotic episode at the party, and in a fit of jealous rage, had stolen Chloe's gift and run away. He ended the post by asking for their prayers and support during this difficult time. Chloe had chimed in right below him. She wrote that she was scared for me, but also completely heartbroken, that her one special gift had been stolen by her own sister. They weren't just fighting me anymore. They were erasing me, painting me as a crazy, vindictive shrew so that no one would ever listen to a word I said. My entire history, my credibility, was being systematically dismantled in front of everyone I had ever known. I sank onto my sofa, the phone feeling as heavy as a brick in my hand. The old panic started to rise in my chest, hot and sharp. This is how they always won. Not with facts or logic, but with public opinion. With shame. My hand instinctively went to my neck, my fingers closing around the cool silver of my mother's locket. She'd given it to me a week before she died. Never let anyone else tell you who you are, Maya, she had whispered. My phone buzzed again, this time with an email notification. The subject line was cold and corporate. Urgent family matter resolution. It was from my father's assistant. A formal invitation, no, a summons, to the Sterling Innovations annual dinner, just 2 days from now. Your father has reserved time during the shareholders' address, it read, to publicly resolve this unfortunate family situation. Your attendance is expected. It was a trap, a public execution, and he was planning to finish the job he started on New Year's Eve. I met Uncle Ben in a quiet coffee shop on the other side of town. He looked older than I remembered, with more gray in his hair, but his eyes were the same, kind, sharp, and missing nothing. He didn't offer hugs or pity. He just slid a worn, leather-bound journal across the table. Your mother's, he said, his voice low. She documented everything. The public execution my father had planned was now just 48 hours away. It was about to become my stage. For the next 2 days, my small apartment became a war room. The anger I felt began to cool, hardening into something sharp and focused. Pure steel. First, the money. I printed 2 years of bank statements, the pages piling up on my coffee table. I took a yellow highlighter and marked a $35,000 wire transfer I'd made to his supplier. Then I went back, month by month, and highlighted every smaller transfer, the thousands of dollars he'd siphoned from my account for what he always called short-term family loans. Next, the car. We pieced it together. My father had used my money for the deposit, calling it a joint investment. But the dealership's legal department had a rule. The primary financier had to be the primary name on the title. It was a legal technicality, a loose thread he'd probably intended to snip later. He'd handed me the paperwork to sign, and I, trusting him completely, had signed it. The official title had been mailed to my apartment by mistake 2 weeks ago. He didn't even know I had it. Then, Uncle Ben opened my mother's journal. And we found the knockout blow. In her elegant, looping script, she had detailed her plan. A separate trust, one my father knew nothing about. A codicil in her will, which my father, as the executor, was legally bound to follow. It stipulated that on my 25th birthday, $75,000 were to be released to me. For 2 specific purposes, a down payment on a home, and the purchase of a new, reliable car. My 25th birthday was 4 months ago. He hadn't just ignored the will. He had illegally withheld my inheritance. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. He hadn't bought Chloe a car. He had stolen my inheritance to buy a gift for his favorite daughter, while planning to humiliate me with a $5 toy. Uncle Ben had already spoken to my mother's estate lawyer and had a signed, notarized affidavit confirming everything. I compiled it all into a thick black binder. Each tab was a nail for his coffin: bank records, signed agreements, mom's will, witness affidavit. As I printed the final page, an email popped up on my laptop. It was from a major tech firm, a dream job I'd applied to months ago. They were impressed with my portfolio. They wanted to schedule an interview. It was a lifeline, a future completely separate from my family. But it all hinged on my visa, which hinged on my financial stability, which now hinged entirely on the contents of this binder. The night before the dinner, my phone buzzed with a text from Uncle Ben. He's planning to have security there to escort you out after he makes his speech. He thinks you'll cause a scene. A second text followed a moment later. I've arranged a +1 for you. Don't worry. Just stick to the plan. The ballroom was cold, sterile, and silent, except for the clinking of silverware. 200 people in stiff business attire turned to stare as I walked in, my heels clicking on the marble floor. On stage, my father was mid-speech, waxing poetic about family values and corporate integrity. His voice faltered for a fraction of a second when he saw me, his eyes narrowing into slits. At the head table, Chloe sat preened and perfect, a smug little smile on her face. She thought this was her victory lap. He finished his business remarks and his tone shifted, becoming somber and heavy with fake concern. And on a personal note, he said, his eyes sweeping the room, as many of you know, our family has faced a challenge recently. My eldest daughter, Maya, has been unwell. A wave of sympathetic murmurs rippled through the audience. I could feel their pity like a physical weight. Her actions have been deeply concerning, he said, shaking his head with practiced sadness. And in a moment of profound confusion, she took something that was meant for her sister. He was about to move on, to dismiss me as a footnote in his heroic family narrative. That's when I started walking toward the stage. Immediately, 2 large security guards moved to intercept me, their hands raised. I believe I have a right to reply, I said. My voice was clear and steady, carrying easily through the silent room. Before my father could signal the guards to remove me, a voice boomed from a table near the front. It was Uncle Ben, standing up. Let her speak, Richard. This is a shareholder meeting after all. Let's have some transparency. Checkmate. My father was trapped. In front of his investors and colleagues, he couldn't possibly refuse a request for transparency. He gave a curt, angry nod. The security guard stepped back. I walked up the small steps and stood at the podium. I placed my thick, black binder on it with a solid, definitive thud. I looked out at the sea of curious faces. Then I looked directly at my father. And I waited. The silence stretched. 1 second. 5. 10. The air in the room grew thick and uncomfortable. I let it. My father is right, I began, my voice perfectly calm. This is about a car, but it's also about integrity. I took a small USB drive from my pocket and handed it to the AV technician beside the stage. Please put the first file on the screen. Reveal number 1, the money. Behind me, the giant projector screen lit up with a scanned image of a bank statement. A wire transfer for $35,000 from my personal account to Apex Supplies. The date was clearly visible. 6 months ago, I paid this invoice to save this company from a lawsuit. My father's mismanagement caused, I stated, my voice even. He called it my duty. This was the first payment toward the car. The crowd began to shift in their seats. Whispers broke out. This was not the story they had been told. My father's face was turning a blotchy, furious red. And to reveal number 2, the agreement. He felt guilty, I continued, so he drafted an agreement, promising to pay me back by co-signing on a vehicle for me, an asset in my name. Please show the second file. A signed contract appeared on the screen. It detailed the debt he owed me and the car as repayment. His familiar, arrogant signature was at the bottom. The Mercedes wasn't Chloe's gift, I said, looking directly at my sister. It was my payment. Chloe's jaw dropped. She stared at our father, her eyes wide with a confusion that was quickly turning to horror. The Golden Girl's perfect world was cracking. Reveal number 3, the avalanche. My voice dropped, and I felt a surge of cold power. But the real reason I'm here has nothing to do with my father's debt. It's about my mother's. I turned my head and looked toward the main entrance at the back of the ballroom. As if on cue, the doors opened, and a woman in a sharp gray suit stepped inside. And that is my cue, she said, her voice commanding. My father went completely pale. He knew exactly who she was. She walked with purpose down the central aisle and up onto the stage, standing beside me. She didn't look at my father. She addressed the room. My name is Eleanor Vance. I was the executor of the late Sarah Sterling's personal estate trust. Then, she turned to my father. Her voice was pure ice. Richard, you were the executor of her main will. A will which contained a codicil, which I have right here, clearly instructing you to disburse $75,000 from her trust to Maya on her 25th birthday for the purchase of a vehicle and a home deposit. You ignored it. You illegally withheld her inheritance. She let that sink in before delivering the final blow. The funds used to purchase that car were not yours, nor were they a repayment. They were drawn from an account containing Sarah's money. You stole your daughter's inheritance to gift it to your other daughter. A collective, audible gasp swept through the entire ballroom. It was absolute, devastating. Ms. Vance looked back at the stunned audience. For the record, I will be filing a motion with the probate court tomorrow morning to have Richard removed as executor and investigated for breach of fiduciary duty. My father stood frozen, his mouth half open, a statue of a fraud in front of his entire professional world. Chloe was openly sobbing, her face buried in her hands. I picked up my binder. I didn't look at them again. I walked off the stage, down the aisle, and out of the ballroom. I didn't run. I walked. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic. My father was forced to step down from the board pending a full investigation. His reputation, the thing he valued more than his own family, was shattered in a single evening. A few days later, a courier delivered a large envelope from Ms. Vance. Inside was a cashier's check for the full remaining amount of my mother's trust. Tucked in with it was a handwritten note on her legal stationery. All it said was, "Your mother would be so proud." I never spoke to my father or sister again. They tried to call, they tried to text, but I had already changed my number. A wall had gone up, and they were on the other side of it. The first thing I did was secure my future. With the inheritance officially in my bank account, the financial stability requirement for my visa was no longer an issue. I walked out of the immigration office with a fresh stamp in my passport. The weight of the world finally lifted from my shoulders. The second thing I did was quit my job. The interview with the tech firm was less of an interview and more of a welcome. I started the following Monday. The third thing I did was lease my own apartment. In a neighborhood so far from my childhood home it felt like another country. It was small, but every inch of it was mine. Tonight, Uncle Ben came over for a housewarming dinner. We ordered takeout and ate it from the cartons, sitting on my living room floor because I didn't own a table yet. He'd brought a gift, a framed picture of my mom, laughing on a beach, her face full of sunlight. We placed it on the empty mantel. Through the window, I could see the white Mercedes parked on the street below. It wasn't a trophy anymore. It was a tool, a reminder, proof that I had a legacy of my own, left by a woman who saw my strength long before I ever did. "To new beginnings," Uncle Ben said, raising his can of soda in a toast. I clinked my can against his. "To Mom," I said, a real smile reaching my eyes. For the first time in my entire life, I felt completely and utterly free. They tried to bury me under the weight of their lies, not realizing they had planted a seed. And that seed had just broken through the concrete. And you know what? That's a story worth telling. What's a time you had to fight for what was rightfully yours? Let me know in the comments below.